This is the Hope Not Note podcast,
where we answer your questions and share inspirational stories to fill your soul with hope.
Our mission is to empower hope to those who have been plagued by note.
I'm Dr. Dylan Caswell.
And I'm Brandy.
And we're here to bring you out of the note and into hope.
Welcome to the Hope Not Note podcast. We are so grateful for you tuning in. Every single week on Wednesday, we have a new episode for you, and we hope that you enjoy.
And shout out to our host, Brandy, because she has been fighting off a cough with a sore throat and is still here recording, showing up, trying not to cough during the recording.
Yeah, I'm really doing my best, but there are times where I have to be like, yeah. So I apologize if you hear any of that.
Pat on the back for showing up.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That is very nice.
Yeah.
All right. Our listener named Eve asked us a question, and she says, I ask a lot of my body, but lately I'm getting frustrated because it feels like it's on a different page. I want it to do something, but then it does something else. And she gives the example of, I'll go to do a squat and I know that I can do the squat, but then my body gets stuck and I have to dump the weight off of me. So what wisdom do you have for getting my mind and my body on the same page?
Wisdom.
What wisdom do you have? Wisdom, Dr. Dylan?
Thank you, Eve. It reminds me of like the yips in baseball. What do they call it in gymnastics? Like the spinnies or the shifties?
The shifties.
The swifties.
Yeah, I'm drawing a blank right now. I was gonna say the zoomies, but that's like a dog.
A dog that gets excited.
Yeah.
I don't say the twirlies. I'm just coming up with things that spin. So,
but you get the picture.
You get the picture. And it's very frustrating. I think there's a couple of different ways to answer it. We'll take the easier one first and then dive into the deeper nuances and details second. So if you're listening, buckle in.
Let's go.
This is going to be I think a thought-provoking episode. But we'll see.
I love that.
Maybe want to listen to it and just be like, no, got it. Makes sense. But anyway, I think...
Well, time out. If it is thought-provoking and you have questions, you can go to our website, hope.nope.org, and ask us those follow-up questions.
Oh, we can make this a series.
Yeah.
A, B, C, D, give us some new questions.
Yeah.
Let's go. So first and foremost, if we're asking the body to do something, we have to ask, has the body been exposed to it before? I know, simple answer, but we just have to ask, have you done this before? If you have not run a marathon before and you haven't ran and you show up to do a marathon, your body will not allow you to do it because it has not been exposed to that stressor before. The brain is working by prediction, trying to figure out, are we safe? Are we in danger? Where does our energy storage go to for us to do these things? And if it starts to calculate that, hey, this is dangerous, we haven't been here before, it's going to start to shut down the body. Even though the mind can say, keep going, keep going, keep going, the body's going to say, no, it's not going to happen because we don't have the prereqs, we haven't built the capacity to do this. And there's a lot of long-standing science looking at progressive overload to be able to do these things. If you're asking your body to throw 90 pitches in a game and the most that you've ever thrown is 30, there's some heat that's going to come off your fastball because you haven't built up the capacity for it. So make sure that you've built that up first and foremost. I know it's simple and it seems like common sense, but we got to cover all of this, right? Because we've worked with a lot of athletes that they've been to all these different people, quote unquote experts, and we ask these simple questions and they're like, no, I haven't done that. And that makes a lot of sense. Dang, I wish I did that first. So Eve, it sounds like you have done that, right? And for the next part of the answer, it's like, no, I've done those things. I've been squatting. I've been on a training program. I know this is the weight that I can hit, and I'm telling my body to do it, and then I go to do it, and my body still doesn't do it. Like, what the heck is happening? I'm on the mound. I'm saying throw a fastball outside corner, and I'm throwing it at the backstop. What the heck is happening? I'm a gymnast, and I've done this routine or I've done this move thousands of times, probably millions of times in practice. And yet when I get out there, it's not connecting. Like, what do I do in that situation? That dives into the deeper combo, right? Because we have to understand that it's the spirit, mind, and body. And when we say it in that order, it makes it seem like they're all on their own. Like they're compartmentalized. Like there's the spirit, there's the mind, and then there's the body. And the reality is that they're not separated. They're all intertwined, the spirit, the mind, and the body. Then we have to start looking at this. And as I go on in the conversation, it's going to start to sound like I'm talking about them as if they are individual aspects, but know that they all influence each other and they're all intertwined.
Yeah, think of like a Venn diagram, like a three-part Venn diagram where like they're all overlapped all overlapping.
Right.
And that is how it should be. I think in the world, it's very much perceived that they're all meant to be separate. And like,
Right.
I'm in my body box right now. I'm in my spirit box right now. But the reality is it's like a Venn diagram and they're all intertwined, all connected.
Yep, 100%. And know that as we're talking through this, because now to understand this, we have to talk of each of them as an individual, knowing that they are all intertwined, right? So we'll kind of set that as a framework. So let's start with the body first, because the body is what we get frustrated with. And then we start to blame the body, and we go for treatments and solutions that try to treat the body. But what ends up happening is that it continues to get the command and it's doing what it's supposed to be doing from the command. And you have to keep going back for that same treatment over and over and over and over again. So the body, right? It's the physical makeup, it's layers of tissues. The brain is the commander of the body. The brain tells the body what to do, and then the body says, aye, aye, Captain, got it, carrying that out. The body is obedient to the commander of the body, which is the brain. So the body, it's going to follow these commands. We have to not blame the player. We have to start looking at the command, right? It's the equivalent of, I like the analogy of you're running the bases. And we had a third base coach when I was growing up. The third base coach will signal you to run home or tell you to stop at third, right? You can get the run, go, stop at third. They can make a play and get the out, so stay here. We had a coach that would put his hand up, signaling stop, and the other hand would say go. So as a player,
That is so
you
confusing.
don't know what to do. And like I was always an aggressive base runner, so I'm like, see ya, I'm going. And then there's a few times I get thrown out, right? You take the risk, it happens. So I get thrown out, and then, I'd get blamed. Like, why'd you go? Your hand was pointing and circling, and I looked at that, and that told me to go. So I'm following your command. If you want me to stay, try going with both hands and saying, stay.
Mm-hmm.
Now I can follow that, and now we're on the same page, right? See where we're going with this. The command sets the play in action. The command tells the body what it's supposed to be doing. So that kind of sets the stage for the body. But it comes to the question of, well, why do we have the body? And then where does the command come from, right? The body is how our soul interacts with the physical world. That is why we have the body. And it's not the body or the soul, it's the body and the soul. Like that's what makes a human being, is the intertwining of the soul and the body. Again, the body is what allows us to interact with the physical world. The soul is what helps to influence how our body interacts with the world from the truth and understanding and intellect that it was created with. So when we look at the mind, we tend to think that the mind is synonymous with the brain. The mind is not synonymous with the brain. The mind, and this is where it gets deeper and philosophical, but also like the science with it, the mind transcends the brain, meaning that there can be no readings of brain activity, but the mind can still function, similar with the spirit. So the mind is the intellect. It allows us to know and understand the truth. It allows us to know what's rational, allows us to know our core being, our core values, allows us to know how our soul was created, allows us to know our identity. Spirit, which is synonymous with the soul, mind, which is our intellect, which is part of the soul, and then body, which allows these things to interact with the physical world. But again, they're all intertwined. All right. How are we doing so far?
Great.
We're doing great.
I'm
Okay.
loving it.
All right. So now we got to take another step back and look at the bigger perspective. The body's following the command that the brain is telling it, but you know that it's not on the same page as you. So why is it getting the command to do the thing that you don't want it to be doing? I would say, and from athletes that we've worked with, this tends to be true, is that their mind is starting to get muddy. They're starting to take in things that add confusion to what they know to be the truth. And when the mind starts to get muddy, it starts to influence what that output is going to be. And when it influences that output, the brain receives that as input and then creates the output based off of the influence of what the muddy mind is speaking to it. So consciously, we can sit here and say, no, I'm doing self-talk. I'm doing positive affirmations. I'm loving my body, but we're still on a different page. Like it's not making sense. Well, it's because consciously you're overriding what a muddy mind that's supposed to know truth and understanding is telling the body. So we have to go back and ask these questions of how do you think that you were created? What were the truths that you knew at one point? What's the evidence that you've gotten as your body has interacted with the physical world, carrying out these different things that have started to muddy the mind? Because we've talked about this previously, but we're not created with doubt. We're not created with fear. There's a video of these little precious babies, and their parents are on the other side of the room, and they're able to look into the room, but the babies can't look out of the room. And there's snakes. Oh gosh, it's like my worst nightmare, right? But there's like snakes crawling or slithering all over these babies. And these babies are like picking them up and like moving them around, and the parents are behind the screen like, oh my gosh, oh my gosh, oh my gosh, and the baby's just like, and they weren't venomous. Like there's regulations and stuff like that. But I look at that and I'm like, that is the bravest baby I've ever seen in my whole life. But the reality is because I've become conditioned in the world to fear those things. We're not born with that. It is a learned behavior. Can we unlearn it? Sure. It takes a lot of courage and it's hard to do, but it's just showing the point that like we're not created with doubt, we're not created with fear, we're not created with thinking that and I want to be careful how I say this, but the doubts that make us think that we're not enough, because on our own we're not enough. But with our creator, we are enough, right? So there's the humility part of it, but these things that we learn through life start to condition into this matrix of the spirit, the mind, and the body that start muddying the mind and starting us to think that we're not safe, we're being attacked. We can achieve that. We're not able to achieve this thing because we're not enough. We should have doubts because I've seen evidence in the physical world of doubts, right? Like I know we're supposed to be loving and that we have all these things provided for us, but what about this person that didn't seem to have that? And multiply that by hundreds, thousands, and like, yeah, we're supposed to be in this loving world. Why is there war happening? Like, why are these innocent people being murdered if these were the truths that I was born with, right? And so the mind starts to get muddy. And when the mind gets muddy, it's hard for the mind to be on the same page as the body. Because in this, the brain can start to say, hey, I know how the mind is influencing us, but I'm going to decide to do it a different way. Because all of this is created with the ability to have free will, meaning that we get to choose what the outcome, or we get to choose how we live our lives out. And I'm not saying that these things don't happen in the world because that'd be a false framework. They do happen. But the truth and the understanding is that it's happening for reasons that we may not know. And all things are happening for good. But there also is the reality of there is free will and people make the choices that allow these things that we're seeing to make us think that we are that we shouldn't believe in these truths that we're created with. All right, checkpoint. How are we doing?
Great. I almost want to use like myself as a case study of
Yeah.
like when I had my injury and like when it's different than the conversation of like trying to get under a barbell and doing a squat, but for like my specific story of having an injury, my body had the complex regional pain, but like the way that I was able to heal and overcome that was a lot of like mind spirit work.
Mm,
And then I had to do progressive overload for my body because it hadn't done really anything for nearly a decade. But there was a big piece of like mind spirit work that I had to do. And I would credit that more, not more, but like it all played its part.
right. It's we cannot continue to just focus on the body because it's influenced by the soul, which has the spirit and the mind in there. And again, it gets confusing, right? Because it's like, well, I'm telling myself that I'm safe. I'm telling myself these things. That's great, but it's not complete.
Mhm.
Like you can use these things to help. And like you said, we have to use loading and exposure to give ourselves the evidence to start to clear the mind, right? But we also need to understand that by saying it consciously, it starts to impact it, but there also needs to be other evidence that happens
Mhm.
to bring that to fruition. So we got to take it the next step, right? And I'm starting to, you study and you start to develop these little pet peeves, these things that say, okay, I'm not going to go on social media anymore because it just fires me up, right? But for me, it's this whole push towards and right, like we've probably said this before, of like we got to not take care of the symptoms, we got to take care of the root cause. Awesome. Like fully on board with that. What do you believe to be the root cause of this injury or illness or condition? Like what is the root of that? Because if you're telling me that it's something that's going on with the body and that's the only thing that's being addressed, that's not the root cause. That is the symptom.
Mhm.
And you can do all the percussion massage in the world. You can do cupping, you can do lymphatic draining, you can do loading, you can get as strong as you possibly want to get to and still have the symptoms, right? We're seeing it in tendon research now. You can build the tendon, make the tendon more resilient, have evidence of that through imaging that the tendon has changed, and you can still have pain. Why? Because there's other concepts to this that we need to take it the step further. And people say, well, the root cause is because there's hip weakness. Okay, go strengthen the hip. Well, the root cause is they have a weak core. They have a weak core. Like they're just doing Bulgarian split squats holding 100 pounds. Where's the weakness
Mhm.
in that core? Like, yes, these things need to be trained, but we need to take it to the next step if we're going to say we're getting to the root cause of this. And as things have advanced in sports rehab and physical therapy, we learn the biopsychosocial model, like the biomechanics, the psychological aspect, and then social, like society things, right? It used to be all biomechanical. And then we started to see these studies showing like, yeah, they can matter, but not as much as we once thought they do. And now we're seeing that, wow, the psychosocial part carries much more weight
Mhm.
than the bio part. And then we jump into the psychosocial part and we have to start looking at, well, what are these mismatches when an athlete has the yips or their body feels like it's not on the same page? And to me, like we have to go to what has muddied the mind throughout your life that is now giving or is now influencing the brain to send the command to the body that consciously your brain is saying something different, but the mind is feeding it something that it may not no longer or that it doesn't believe to be truth
Mhm.
anymore.
So what, like, I love everything that you've said, but to sum it up, what is like a practical step someone can do to start clearing out the mud in their mind?
The mud in the
The
mind.
mud in the mind.
So the mud in the mind, how do you start clearing it out? And I want to use a couple different examples that pop up. But when And we'll use it in athlete terms from Eve that sent this question in, right? With like
course.
squatting. But I'm going to take the squatting example and I'm going to bring it to baseball, and then we'll bring it back to squatting. So when a player, like a pitcher, has the yips, right? Or a hitter, right? They go up to the bat and they're like, I'm going to hit a home run. I'm telling my body to hit a home run, and they strike out looking over and over and over again. They're in a slump. What gets them out of that, right? Well, people say, oh, getting more reps in. How many more reps are you going to put in before you realize that that's not the answer? Just a question.
Yeah.
Just a question I'd put out there, right? More ball, more of the pitching machine, more of that. Like, come on. So what does help them get out of there? Well, their mind has become muddy because of the pressures that they've taken on, the burdens that they're carrying, the spotlight that they're under, the pressure that they put on themselves to, like, I'm chasing excellence. I need to get this done to achieve this thing. So I'm putting all this stuff on me. And they start to forget why they loved the game.
Mm-hmm.
They start to forget what their mission was in playing the game. They start to forget that they were created specifically, uniquely, and individually to play the game the way that they play the game.
Mm-hmm.
So what gets them out of the yips? What gets them out of a slump? What gets them out of the spinnies, or
I think it's the twisties.
the twisties?
Yeah.
What gets them out of the twisties? Going back to how you were individually created. Going to the park before the fans fill in and smelling the grass getting cut. Going out, running your hand through the dirt. Going out and doing a little soft toss home run derby. Going to the gym and just enjoying it again, like a kid, right? And Travis Kelce, like, how is he playing at this age? Yes, he's slowed down a little bit, whatever. He's still phenomenal player. It's like Jason Kelce said about him. He's like a kid out there playing in the backyard.
Yeah, it's like recess every
It's
time
like
he
recess.
plays.
And that's what gets your body back on the same page, is remembering why you're doing this and how you're created to be out there doing this.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, you've gotten evidence to start to not believe that truth. You've gotten doubters, critics, all these things screaming at you from the physical world, telling you that you're not capable, you can't do this, you're not enough, you stink, well, you thought you were a good player. Like, all these things can start to get in your head, and then your mind gets muddy and it starts to go, I don't know if this is how I was created. I don't know if this is how I'm supposed to do that. Well, now in this spirit, mind, body loop, there's miscommunications happening. You have a rowing team, and you got one rower going in a different direction. You're not on the same page. Like, you're not going to get there. You have a coach that's waving to go home to third and holding their hand up at the same time. Like, there's a miscommunication, right? The body's got to pick a lane and go with it, and it may not be the result that you wanted it to be.
Mm-hmm.
So how do we unmuddy it? You got to get back to that foundation.
It's almost like becoming childlike again.
Childlike again.
And I want to make sure that when I say that, I'm saying childlike, not childish.
Yeah.
Right? Like, you're not gonna go be a baby, and you're not gonna be like acting like a little kid in the sense of, like, I guess, like, negativities that could be associated with childish. But childlike is like having the faith and the trust and the surrender and just like the joy of what being a kid is about before you even know that there's pressure in the world.
Right.
That's what it's about. It's being childlike again.
Yeah, not childish. I love that.
Mm-hmm.
I love that. Muddy mind, childlike versus childish. Good little things in here.
Thanks.
So to Eve, what I would say, and if we were working with someone going through this, that it'd be a fairly long assessment to get through and kind of figure out, like, why is the mind muddy? Is the body physically prepped for what you need to be doing? And kind of having these vulnerable conversations of these different things. And Eve, I would start with just saying, why'd you start squatting in the first place?
Mm-hmm.
Like, what led you to say, hey, I'm going to go to the gym and I'm going to squat, right? Because, like, specifically in the question you asked about squatting, there's millions of exercises you could do. Why was squatting the example that's in here? So, like, what led you to say, hey, I'm going to go to the gym, I'm going to work on this movement? Like, why and where do you think that was going to project you to, right? And we would start there just to have that conversation of like, awesome, this is meaningful to you.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Like, let's build upon that because if it's meaningful to you, we should not sweep it under the rug. We should put effort in to allow the thing that's meaningful to you to be carried out in the physical world. Body carrying out what the soul wants it to do, you're going to be functioning great.
Mm-hmm.
When there's that mismatch, not going to be functioning well. So we'd say, why, like, what led you to the gym? What led you to squatting? What is it about working out that you enjoy? Like, is it camaraderie? Is it music playing in the background? Is it being surrounded by like-minded people that are also working hard to better themselves? Is it the challenge of facing adversity and thinking like, oh man, I don't know if I can lift this weight and get underneath it and doing it? Are you out squatting the boys in the gym? And it's like you get to kind of stand, not proud or boastful, but just like, yeah, I'm strong.
Girl
Like
power.
girl power. Look at me. Which is cool, but like, what is it about it that brings you to that, right? And people will say like, oh, it's kind of like meditative, right? Like deep breathe, om. And I had a satellite clinic in a place that had gongs and
Waterfalls.
waterfalls, and oh my gosh, by like 3 hours in there, I'm like, if I hear another gong, I'm gonna lose my mind. That is not meditative for me. It is for other people, sure, but for me, what's meditative for me is like loud environments, weights being dropped, athletes getting after it. Like that is my happy place. And I know
Mm-hmm.
it may sound strange to people, but like everyone has their own thing.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, that like that's the meditative. So is this something that is meditative to you that you've put a lot of pressure on for whatever the reason may be? So now instead of this being like your stillness arena, it's this arena where you have to battle these demons saying that you're not strong, you're not resilient, you can't lift that. Who do you think you are? And then how do we get back to this command center that's saying like, no, this is like great for you to be here. Like this is fun. Like go approach this and enjoy the process, enjoy being underneath that bar again. Um, and then we start to kind of unravel a little bit or start to dive in more of like, what evidence have you gotten from the external environment, right? Because there's the internal environment. What's our hormone levels? What's our pH level? What's happening in the body? And then there's the external environment. What are the things that I'm seeing in the environment, hearing, tasting, touching, smelling, all of those things? What have you gotten in the external environment that has now influenced you to start to believe that you're not strong, that you are not able to do this squat, that is starting to, because Eve, I would guess that the truth that you once knew is that you are strong, resilient, and that you can do these things. And then somewhere along the line, you got evidence from the external environment saying, no, you can't.
Mm-hmm.
And it may not be from stuff in the gym.
Mm-hmm.
It may be from things at work. It may be from a breakup, right? Like you go through a breakup and you get dumped. What is your, and I'm not saying that you've got dumped, but you get dumped and what's your first thought? Like, what, I'm not enough? Like, I thought we were in love and all of a sudden I'm like not enough to be loved. Can that transfer over to how you're performing underneath the barbell? Yeah. Yeah, very, very much so. So what is the evidence that you've gotten that has allowed your mind to start to become muddy and carry you away from the truths? And once we find that, we do an interesting practice with our athletes where, all right, we've identified that there's a mismatch between your body and between your mind, right? Let's pretend that this is a team because it is a team. And let's pretend that like you as the human being are the captain, El Capitan. You are the captain. What would you do as a captain if you had two teammates that weren't getting along or on the same page with each other? You're just gonna let the season go on like that? Like, how does that now start to impact the locker room? Right? It's a recipe for disaster. So what do we do instead? Let's handle this head on. Let's get these players to talk to each other. What's the miscommunication? And oftentimes, from what we said back in the beginning, is the body saying, I don't get your beef because I'm just doing what you're telling me to do, right? I'm just following the command that you sent to me. And if you're sending me if you're sending me a confusing command, sorry, I got to pick one and do it, right? If you're telling me to stay and go, I got to pick one. Or I can't just stand in the baseline. Like, I got to make a decision. So the body's saying, like, hey, lead me. You want to be the leader? Lead me. Give me clear direction because I'm confused on where this is going. And then the other side gets to go, oh, wow, like, sorry, I didn't recognize that there was that confusion. Wow, okay. I can do better. You can do better. Let's get on the same page. So how do we get on the same page? Well, let's apologize to each other, right? So what we've done with athletes is we have them put themselves, and again, it's all intertwined, but for the sake of the practice to understand it, put yourself in the perspective of your mind. Write a letter from your mind to your body. Now, put yourself in the perspective of the body communicating to the mind. Write a letter. Read the letters. See what's similar. See where there's miscommunication. What do you do when there's miscommunication? Address it. Let's talk to it head on. So that's kind of how do you get back to remember why you loved it, remember why you're created to do it, and believe in those things. And then you can get into the next parts of it if that doesn't get you to where you need to be.
And I would argue that the remembering the why you loved it, like that refuels your spirit, which is so important because so often the spirit is neglected and we forget the why. We forget that our spirit and our soul like is essential in our being, in who we are, especially as athletes. And so getting back to that like grounded truth, yes, is good for like the mind and the body, but it's also very good and like fuels and re-energizes the spirit as well.
Fuel the spirit, heal the mind, energize the body.
Drop the mic.
Drop the mic. Drop the mic. And again, they all influence each other, right? And another example, just to really, really drill this home, like really, because it's such an important concept, and I think it gets us closer to the root of things, right? And hopefully it helps people to start to understand, like, oh wow, like this treatment is good for my body, and I should continue with that treatment because it is helping my body. But that is an aspect of it. And if I'm not taking care of the other aspects of it, I'm going to have to continue to do this thing over and over and over again because you clear out this area of swelling or drainage or whatever it may be, and the command doesn't change. Guess what's going to happen? It's going to come back. And then you have to get it back out, and then it's going to come back. So, like, yeah, we can use these incredible technologies and therapies to help the body, but we're not going to solve the condition unless we start getting the intertwining of the other things, the mind and the spirit. Another quick example is just, we see this all the time, especially in the special warfare officers. I just wish I want to take care of my sleep. I tell myself to go to sleep, but I don't go to sleep. I lay there in bed and I tell my body and I'm saying to my brain, go to sleep. And I just lay there. There's a mismatch. You're telling yourself to rest, but you're not able to rest. Well, why does that happen, right? And we can look at things in the environment, screen time, caffeine, all that stuff plays a role, right? So this is an example of like, it's not just the body, it's not just the spirit, it's not just the mind. The body plays a role. Chug a pot of coffee before you're going to bed. Yeah, you're not going to sleep well. Drink a Celsius before you're going to bed. You're not going to sleep well, right? So the body plays a role.
Yeah, the environment.
The environment, the mind, like, all of them play a role. So here's an example of how they all play the role. You know, what you do to prep your body for sleep is going to impact how you sleep, right? When you go to sleep, the question I pose to you is, can you sleep if you think that you're in danger? No,
No, not
no,
really.
the command center
Not well.
of the body is not going to say, oh, perfect, we're in danger. Let's go ahead and go into deep sleep so that we don't hear the thing that's going to potentially kill us. Like, that's a good operating system, right? So if the perception is that we're under attack, that is going to impact the way that we sleep. Why? Because the way that the spirit is created is that we are loved, we are provided for, and that we're safe. We come into the world and we get physical evidence that that is not the case, especially if you are a member of the military or any type of defense operation, whatever that may be. There's evidence everywhere that that is not the case. So now the mind starts to get muddy, that we were not created to feel safe, that we were not created to be provided for. We got to go out and get it, right? So now the body and the brain saying, let's sleep, where the muddy mind is saying, yeah, I don't know if these truths are the truth anymore. So no, we're not going to allow you to sleep because we got to keep this thing rolling in case something is to happen. And at certain parts, like referencing special warfare officers, that's a great design for deployment during wartime. Like,
Yeah.
you need that. But then transitioning back into civilian life, like, yeah, that's hard, right? And then getting away from that population just to a general population that feels like they're quote unquote under attack and they don't have stillness and they don't have a source to go to that allows them to say, not just say, but like believe down in their being, down in their soul that they are safe. Yeah, the sleep's going to be impacted. So we can do all the sleep studies, we can do all the things to the body, and those can help. But if we want to get to actually addressing the whole human being, we can no longer leave out the conversation of the spirit and the mind. And we have to understand that the mind is not synonymous with the brain. That's all I got.
I love it.
That's all I got.
Shall we dive into hope stories?
Let's dive into them.
Okay, your turn.
All right, I'll start with one. So, man, we talk about leadership and just like what it means to be a good leader. And I think Eve is a great leader because, wow, like the vulnerability, the courage to submit a question like this. Like this is a deep conversation. It takes the vulnerability, it takes courage, it takes reflection and going like, yeah, dang, like I can change this, I can change that, and all that. So it's great. It's like what I love to talk about and take to that next level and get deeper and deeper. And I'll just say that my hope story is like working in a particular population, I didn't perceive that I would be able to have these conversations. And to be honest, I was a little worried about having them. And come to find out, this population is eager for this info and to dive into these things and are like, man, I'm so fired up with these different offerings of treatments and this and this and that because like I know that there's more and I appreciate that you're willing to take it to that next step, right? And for me, it's difficult, right? Because I come from having my doctorate and being very much into the science, and people will start to think like, well, what you're talking about is pseudoscience. Like what you're talking about is like made up. And what I would say to that is, hey, like from being so involved in the science is what has led me and us into learning about this stuff. Because what science tells us is not often what to do, but more of what not to do or what doesn't work. And when we start seeing that repetitively over time, that like, wow, we can change the body a lot, yet still have these conditions. Like we have to start going, what are we missing in this? And for me, like that was the missing component in treating athletes, was just this focus only on the body and not understanding the intertwining of it. So my hope story is like the continued curiosity that has allowed us to develop more, that now has allowed us to serve populations that we didn't think were possible to.
Well, I mean, I was gonna say something very similar of just like this new to us, I guess. And it's not really new to us, but new to us that we're actually like sharing more publicly of discussing like the soul, discussing the mind, discussing the body in the way that it is intertwined, and how within Hope Not Nope, that is such a key part with how we work with the Hope community and the athletes that we get to work with. I love, like, that is my hope story. Getting to do this more regularly, more intentionally, and getting to share it with people who listen to our podcast, who follow us on Instagram and things like that, because we're able to serve the complete person versus like, and don't get me wrong, I know that there's businesses and accounts out there that are well intended, but they only focus on one part of the human being, where our goal is that we can focus on the entire human being. And I love that we get to do that.
Yeah, it's an honor. It's exciting. It's pushes us in new directions of learning, and
but I'm also seeing that it's like people are craving it.
People are craving it,
which is cool.
Yeah, people are craving it because there's more and more information that's out there, and it's harder and harder to find like, well, what's fact and what's just like made up. And I just see all these evolving treatments that are out there that claim like we're focusing on the whole person. It's like the whole person is the intertwining of the soul and the body. So at any point, you can't claim to be treating the whole person if your focus is only on parts of the body.
Yeah.
And people, well, yeah, we focus on the autonomic nervous system. Great, awesome. That's part of the body.
It's still the body.
It's still the body.
Yeah.
It's closer and it's evolving, and that's phenomenal that we're talking about this and looking at ways to treat it. But that's part of the body. Like, to me, that's still pretty superficial. Like, it's getting deeper, but there's other parts to it. Like,
yeah, we're over here wanting to dive off the diving board and like the 15-foot end, where like a lot of people think that that's what they're doing, but really they're like just walking down the slope a little bit.
Yeah, and I hope it doesn't sound like boastful.
I don't want to.
Like
Yeah,
that,
we're not
but
being cocky about it, but
it's true. And the reason we're bringing it up is because we see so many athletes that spend all this time, they spend all this money, and they do all these things to try to energize the body, and they claim to do all these miracle things, and they don't, and they're left disappointed, and it's false hope, it's a false framework, and now they're more frustrated and discouraged than they ever were from when they started. Where we're like, hey, can we like kind of not do that, or try to do it, at least try to do it differently, that these athletes and people, they don't have to go through all these steps of discouragement before they start to be encouraged. And yes, there is some suffering, there is some adversity that helps in the process of getting to there, but we don't need to have it as prolonged as it is from all this information leaking out there.
Yeah.
And
we would argue it's misinformation.
Yeah, and yeah, I won't go into it because it gets political.
Yeah.
That part, so I'll leave it there.
Yeah. Well, thank you all for listening, and thank you for being part of our Hope community. If you find that this episode specifically would bless and impact someone in your life, that they need to hear the conversation of spirit, mind, body, they don't need to be having the yips or the twisties or getting, stuck in the gym, although that was like the initial question. Just someone that needs to remember that like they're not stuck with their pain, or they can re-energize their body, mind, and spirit. Like if anyone in your life would be impacted or could really use this information, please share it with them. I don't want to be like, oh, share every single episode. Although I think every episode is great. You know, you're going to do what you're going to do at the end of the day. But I hope that if this one specifically really does impact or could impact someone in your life, that you'd be willing to share it. Obviously you can leave us a review on the different platforms. You can follow us on social media, all of that. But really, like, the goal is that we're able to impact you and impact other people's lives and empower them with this information. So thank you.
Yeah, I think one of my favorite things of what we get to do, and I had this happen yesterday. I was working with an individual and we're going through and just having really good conversation. And at the end of it, he just goes, "You gave me hope."
Mm.
And then he goes, "Hope, nope, hope not, nope. That's what you do.
Aww.
You give hope."
Yeah.
And so, like, to me, that's so special. And that's,
Mm.
you know, if you felt impacted by this, when you share it to someone else, you give them that gift.
Yeah.
And that gift is not from us. Like, cool if it was, but it's not. It's from, and that's why we believe our episodes are great, is because we're just trying to do what we're being asked to do.
Mhm.
We're just trying to carry out the mission that's been placed on our hearts. So that, to us, that's what makes it great. And that's what makes you great, is when you get the opportunity and the ability to do that. So we just hope that your spirit is fueled,
Mhm.
and that you have some good things to reflect on, and that you have some good things to put into practice a little bit, right? Like reflecting on these things and, you know, seeking out help from the right people that can guide you through this, whether that's us, whether it's someone else, but like having some of the guidance that can bring you through these powerful things is incredible. So thank you for listening. And remember, every day is not just a day to become hopeful, but an opportunity to become hope.
The Hope Not Know podcast is meant for educational, informational, and personal development purposes only and does not constitute any health or medical advice. If you're looking for specific advice, connect with us to work with a Hope coach. The Hope Not Know podcast shall not be liable or responsible for any loss or damage allegedly arising from any information or suggestions in this podcast.